trip for just a month or two later, it never would have happened. Like everything else, it would have been canceled. We're so grateful that we squeaked through because it was a wonderful trip. Steve and I had been to the village twice before, first in 2013, when Women's Empowerment was just considering a partnership with the organization founded by Jackson. And it was just the two of us then, but we returned in 2017 with another longtime leader of WE. And last year we had 6 other WE supporters and leaders in our group. As we had been in the past, they too all were dazzled by what they saw and learned. Even though it was familiar ground for Steve and me, it was still amazing to see more evidence of how much this project has grown over the years and how much has been accomplished. For example, on that visit last year, we had a chance to meet with one of the very first granny groups organized by Nyaka. This group started in 2007 with just 35 members. Their annual group loan then was for 200,000 Ugandan shillings, which was about $50. That was $50 for the whole group to share with their 35 members for the year. Their second loan was for 600,000 shillings, and then it was 1.2 million, and then 4 million, 10 million, 12 million. And by early 2020, when we were there, they had a 15 million shilling loan, which was about $4,000. And they told us that if they had 25 million, they would have plenty of projects to fund among their 85 members.
So the loan program has made a huge improvement in the lives of thousands of the grandmothers who are raising orphans. And when we first visited, they had a total of $16,000 available in their loan pool in 2013. Today, they have more than $300,000 available to lend. And of that amount, $100,000 has come from interest that the grandmothers themselves paid on earnings from their businesses. So they've been growing their capital with their own hard work. Since the partnership began in 2014, Women's Empowerment has raised and contributed more than $300,000 or almost $300,000 to the Granny program. The lion's share of that money has been used for loan capital too, which is how they got so much. And additional grants have helped pay for the Nyaka organization's employees who administer the program, take the money around, collect the loans, help the grandmothers with the bookkeeping and so forth. So other money from Women's Empowerment has gone to buy water catchment and storage tanks, which many of the grandmothers find very valuable, and garden hose. Some of them don't have garden hose for their gardens. So the stories the individual grandmothers have told us over the years have changed a lot. On our first visit, their businesses consisted of maybe buying a couple of animals, breeding them, and selling them. By 2017, some of the businesses had become much more substantial. They had retail shops, they had general stores, they had restaurants, they had tailoring shops. One lady we met on our most recent visit opened a beauty salon and beauty product shop. She had an amazing assortment of stuff for sale. And she told us she was also diversifying into catering and providing decorations and arranging parties and so forth. So the grandmother's doing an amazing range of things now that they weren't doing 8 years ago. Of course, some of them are still just buying a few chickens and pigs and have fairly modest loans. But with more money available, others are doing bigger projects, and all of the income, or the income from those projects, is to some extent shared with the entire group, each granny group. So pictures are much better than words, and it's with great pleasure that we turn this presentation over to Jackson Kaguri, the founder and chief executive of the Nyaka organization. He'll show us some pictures of grandmothers, and he'll brief us on how they coped with this year of coronavirus that we've just ended.
Good, I am here. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much, Steve and Jeanette. just like you always do, amazing job of describing what Nyaka is doing and how it is doing. So you've basically covered all my presentation. We can go to questions and answers
No,
now.
no.
But thank you so much for that brief and summarized summary of what Nyaka is doing. I do understand, ladies and gentlemen, that we have 45 minutes, and by now we have limited time, and I want to make sure I leave time at the end so we can have questions. When you ask your questions, that is going to guide me to give you more information on some of the summary I'm going to give you. So Nyaka has gone from a small organization I started 20 years ago, believe it or not. August 2021 will be 20 years since a dream and a mission. This young man started to build a small school for children in Nyaka village in Uganda. And the picture in front of you tells the whole story of what Nyaka does, which is to combine children who are orphaned because of HIV/AIDS mostly with grandmothers. And I want to begin by answering the question, why grandmothers and why women empowerment is inviting a man to speak about grandmothers for you. So I was born and raised in a tiny village in Uganda. Steve has been there. I've seen so many faces here, people who have visited. Jean, Win, and Debbie, and many of you have visited Uganda. But when you visited, I would say now Nyaka is a city rather than a village. When I was growing up in this village, mom and dad, who were still living there until mom passed away in December, my dad still lives in this village, was a very tiny village. And the reason grandmothers are so important to me as a person, I had my own grandmother who was a tiny woman who never went to school, who couldn't read and speak a word in English until she died at 102. This grandmother of mine was called Martha. In a local language, that's called Marisa. She had more than 26 grandchildren because my grandfather was a polygamous man. And this grandmother, Martha, made all 26 of us very special children in her eyes. Every day at lunchtime, since we are eating lunch in California, we would eat our food in our homes and then run to grandmother's house because she always has a small sweet banana for you. Now I understand she knew what a dessert was before the word dessert even appeared in our village. She would give you a small banana, make me sit near her bed in a dark room, and she would tell me, this is very special for you because you are my favorite special grandchild. And you eat the banana, and she give you a big hug, and she walked you in the door behind. You run home, dancing and jumping, how you are the favorite grandchild, how you are the only one who gets the banana, and you never told anybody until we grew up as adults and started bragging, and every child told the same story. I was the special one. I got the banana, and I got it every lunchtime. That shows you what grandmother did for me as a child, and how I grew up respecting and loving the grandmother who not only loved me, fed me, but also gave me everything I needed to thrive. The children you see in the picture are children who don't have these grandmothers, many don't. So when we speak of grandmothers here, we are not only talking about biological grandmothers like mine. These are women who have accepted to take in children when they are not even related to them. In 2007, I'm jumping from 2001 when Nyaka started. In 2007, we started a program told these women can gather, meet, and support each other. Already many of them were widows. They were raising orphans, biological or not biological, but they were all scattered around the village, not meeting each other and supporting one another. The idea was to have them to have a space to speak. to each other, support one another. But as they began talking to each other, we found that these groups were becoming stronger and stronger, and the children they were raising were thriving in school. So we said, what do we do now? Maybe we can teach them farming methods. They all know how to farm, but how do you improve your farming? Farming methods came with now, how do you raise your chickens? How do you raise your goats? And then we found out many of them could not raise $20 we are talking about here. When we started working with the women empowerment in 2004, our average loan was between $4 and $40 per woman. But when you heard Speaker and Jeanette speaking here, they are talking about millions. A million in Uganda is basically $250. And when you hear the word million, please don't think that Nyaka grandmothers have 10 million already, 30 million already. No, it is $250. So we partnered with WE, and thank you to each one of you who have supported WE all these many years, both for Nyaka projects and all other projects we hear from, because what you have done is represent that name empowerment, which is changing the lives of these women and their children and the entire community. In the midst of COVID-19, our grandmothers didn't sit back and wait for the lockdown to be done. Jeanette and Steve are right. We were in Uganda right at the beginning of the year. I was there hosting and visiting the children. I was able to leave right when the country closed. Not like in the United States, Uganda government entirely closed the entire country, including places where COVID even had not reached to this day. And when they closed the borders, the children who walk miles to go fetch water, the grandmothers who are sending children to school and have worked so hard with the loans you give to go and send children, all these children were sent home. And now grandmothers were faced with the task of feeding children at home, caring for them when they should be at school, and also working to make sure they can make ends meet. But our grandmothers jumped at the opportunity to start ahead of the curve and become leaders in the communities to sensitize communities on how to wash their hands, how to wear a mask. They started making masks within the uniforms they make. They started joining us, the ones who can speak English, to be poster makers. They become models, basically. You live in California, so modeling out of Los Angeles, moved from there to Nyaka grandmothers. They started modeling on posters. We started sharing information on radio. When you think of podcast now, think of radio. In Uganda, rural area, radio is still the major way of communication. Our staff members and myself from here in Michigan, I would call in and would spend hours and hours on the radio, assuring our grandmothers that number one, Nyaka will be there with our partners like WE Empowerment to support them in everything they are doing. Number two, we will continue to distribute loans. We held on distributing because we wanted to follow the government requirements, but the grandmothers who were allowed to get in the markets were able to get in the markets. And since we have this picture in front of you, I'm going to tell you about this COVID restriction. When the government started the restriction, they said no one should move between their gardens and the market back and forth. And the grandmothers were among those who are affected because many of them grow their onions, their bananas, and their Irish potatoes and bring them to the market every day. One of these women, grandmother of Nyaka, we had the radio program by the government instruction, and the instruction said, if you want to stay selling, you must sleep in the market. Now, when we talk of this market, basically the picture there tells you the whole story. It is outside, there is no shade, there is a temporary tent you can put on top. There is no fence around it. So animals can come and take anything. Thieves can come and steal anything. It's cold at night because this grandmother is closer to the border of Congo and Rwanda. And this grandmother stayed in the market for 90 days. sleeping at her store. In the morning, opened the market. She continued to earn. She continued to use the money we had given her, and her business continued to work. During the day, her grandson would get on a small motorcycle and bring her food, and that's how she was able to survive. When we started the program, ladies and gentlemen, all these grandmothers who are owning shops and businesses were only making baskets, beads, and using their hands to make pot and raise chickens and goats. This here is an improvement from a village to downtown San Diego. When you look at this, think of downtown San Diego business, somebody who was selling at the border in Tijuana, and now they are in downtown San Diego. What is coming out of this is mattresses in their houses. Now they can sleep on a mattress rather than sleep on the floor. They are pooling money and buying blankets for each group member to have a blanket and a bed sheet for the first time in their lives. These women are able to buy a second piece of clothes right now, go buy soap, and several of these women are now employers of their husbands. Steve, you would like that. And I know you've met them. We have a woman who has taken her business and bought a small motorcycle called Boda Boda. The first motorcycle she bought, she gave it her oldest son, who she could not educate because they didn't have money. When the motorcycle made money in the first year, they have saved enough money to buy a second motorcycle, and now her husband is riding that motorcycle, bringing in triple income in the family. As a result of this triple income, they have been able to pay bride price, and the son now is officially married, and bride price was paid by the woman, the mother. The husband, when she's going to a meeting, is the one who puts her on her border, on their border, and take her to the meeting. And when they are not ready, because she's the secretary who takes notes, he sits and waits for her to come back. To many of you, you are used to that. Steve, I know you wake up and make your breakfast for Jeanette. To a man in the village of Nyaka, that is transformational. No man waits for their wife. No man works for their wife. No first son works for their mother. What we have done in this village and what you have supported is creating dignity, human rights, women's rights, and empowerment to the extent that families now work together rather than separate the patriarchal beliefs they have had so many years, and a woman cannot make more than me. So we have taken it beyond just finance to empowering a community that now is transforming every other aspect. The other aspect of Nyaka that we cover, and this was affected by COVID, is housing. Women empowerment supports the microfinance. We get volunteers and funding from other places where we build houses for women who are too old to even run a business. Some of these women have done chickens, others have done goats, and others have received houses. What I would like to share in that aspect is that women sit and all 89 of them have no house. But the women you support are able to look at each other and choose one amongst themselves to get a house first. Ladies and gentlemen, some have died without ever getting a house, but selflessly voting for another person to have it. In other words, they have such a unity that there is no divisions, whether you are Catholic, whether you are Protestant, whether you are Anglican or Muslim. They are women, they are empowered, and they are working together for the best of the community. During COVID-19, we also faced highest rates of domestic violence because we have a program where we work with sex offenders and those kids who have been raped by adults or defied or any type of rape and sex and gender-based violence. Because perpetrators knew that people were locked in their houses, they went on our women. Husbands were beating on their women more than ever, and we were able to get a government license for Nyaka employees to operate and grandmothers to operate as special needed employees, essential workers. So they continue to work during the epidemic, and we have put more than 24 perpetrators in jail, and continued to work and advocate on behalf of our women. There is another situation that arose that we didn't anticipate. If you know the map of Uganda, some of you will have to look it up. We are bordering Congo, Rwanda, and Burundi. Some of our grandmothers, in fact, many that you have visited, the group that visited in January, visited this area near Bwindi Impenetrable Forest. These are women who live on the border in Uganda, but their gardens are across in Congo. So people own land in another country, unheard of, but it is true in this case. And these grandmothers, the moment the country was locked up, they were not allowed to cross the border to go to their gardens. We had to distribute food on a monthly basis to these grandmothers so they can have what to eat and feed their families. Since then, they have gotten now permission to go back to their gardens. So we are not distributing food, but at that point, we supplemented income from Uganda fundraising. We reached out to the Board of Women Empowerment, and they graciously all agreed that we can use some of microfinance money to distribute food. Thank God we got more funds somewhere else and didn't have to use microfinance money, but I thank you that you were flexible enough to allow us to use that money if we needed it. The revolving fund, as Steve has summarized it, has grown from just mere little money to close to 300,000 USA dollars. In Uganda, ladies and gentlemen, that is 1 billion Uganda shillings. And to put it in context, a teacher at Nyaka school makes $85 a month. So we have been able now to grow the number from 35 grandmothers to 15,000 grandmothers. Since we were able to work during the COVID, our grandmothers groups continue to grow. We have recruited more grandmothers. We have given more grandmothers solar lights so they can have a light in their house for once. We have given out 224 water tanks. That's the water can that grandmothers put on the side of the house. And when it rains, they collect rainwater to use during the dry season. We have given 1,400 hose. Hose is the tool you use to dig, to plant and dig in your gardens. And we have continued to work across the border to the extent that one of the grandmothers, ladies and gentlemen, one of the grandmothers group is named Jean Fort. Jean Fort visited Uganda, and as good work you have done at Women Empowerment, we wanted to honor her and call one group after the amazing impact Women Empowerment has done and what Jean Fort has done within the organization. So that is where we stand right now. We continue to work so delicately. We have expanded from one district that would be, think of the county. We have expanded from one district, Kanungu, since 2007, the district of Rukunjiri, where we have another school, and now to another district called Rwanda. Our approach has continued to jumpstart these businesses, give them the capital, which we call a jumpstart fund, and reach as many women as possible while encouraging them to pay back at 97% payback rate. This is the woman's world. Women birthed us, or women have taken care of us, but in our case, they are the ones holding the community together in a sustainable way. We wouldn't be able to do this without all your support, without all your love and care. And on behalf of all the women, all 15,000 of them, who all wish they could be here and thank you themselves, we thank you, we appreciate you, and we won't let you down.
Thank you, Jackson. Well, we don't have 15,000 of them here, but we have a wonderful group and a song and dance just to share before we move into your questions. Some of you have seen this video before, but I can't watch it without just feeling so gratified and amazed by them. So we'll share that now. Please be thinking about your questions, and when the video's done, you'll have a chance to either put your questions in the chat, or if you want to ask it directly, you can raise your hand and then unmute yourself and ask Jackson. Okay. All right, so let's see if we have some questions. Interesting. We do. So Debbie, Women's Empowerment's president, is asking about the availability or the presence of the vaccine for COVID in Uganda now.
So we don't have Uganda so far. We don't have the vaccine. The vaccine has not reached the country. The government Ministry of Health in Uganda issued a statement 3 weeks ago saying as soon as the vaccine gets to Uganda, they will start with the most vulnerable population, which would be the older people and essential workers. So that is just a statement on paper. The vaccine is not there yet. But the cases of coronavirus is also still very low, to the extent that the region where the grandmothers and where Nyaka operates in southwestern Uganda, was one case from Congo that came in, and then they pushed them out to go back to Congo. So there haven't been cases of coronavirus in the region. So no vaccine yet.
Another question, Jackson, that was actually sent to us in advance was a supporter who recalled you having mentioned that Nyaka was actually founded during a pandemic situation, HIV/AIDS, and the question was about how that history and that experience that you've all had enabled you to be better prepared, how it affected your experience or is affecting your experience now with COVID.
Yeah, so that amazing supporter would have listened to the webinars Nyaka did during the height of coronavirus last year. We did about 8 of those. We did them on a monthly basis because we wanted all you supporters to know what's going on the ground. Yes, in 2001, when I started Nyaka, that was at the height of HIV/AIDS during the pandemic. That was mainly felt, it was a pandemic in our communities. That's how Nyaka was started. And I made that statement saying that because we have gone through several of these, there was HIV and AIDS during 2001. There was Ebola. Many of you heard of Ebola, and was mainly coming out of Congo, which borders Nyaka border right there, the grandmothers I was talking about. And then there was West Nile virus, there was SARS. All these have come and left. So when the government shut down the country, we as a Nyaka community didn't have to wait on measures for government to talk about. We jump-started our radio program because we didn't want people to start passing rumors and giving wrong information to our grandmothers who are vulnerable, number one, because they can't read and write. To this day, ladies and gentlemen, the government of Uganda has issued posters all over the country, and none of these posters are in local languages. 65% of the population is illiterate, meaning they cannot read and write a word in English. out of 15,000 grandmothers we care for and are in our care, not more than 20 will stand up and speak in English. So information, the government of Uganda is targeted to their own families, the ministers, and educated people like me and you. But in Nyaka, knowing that our grandmothers can't speak, we jumped on the opportunity and started doing a radio program telling grandmothers in a local language. I speak a local language. I would call in because they listened to me, they've met me, I'm their son, they raised me. Many of them still remind me how they breastfed me when I was a kid. So they will listen to me when I talk to them. And I tell them the information right from WHO, right from CDC. Many of them who were scared if they walked around and the car passes, they might catch coronavirus from the fumes. We were able to do that. But we are also able to educate our children. Remember, students were out of school for entire year. Some of them just started going back. We wanted them, the students, to get information on the radio. So in addition to the money we are giving for food, some of the grandmothers, we had to give them those batteries. You use AAA batteries for toys now in the United States. In Uganda, we use I think this single A battery to put in the radio, AFM, AM radio, and that's how these grandmothers got information. The third part, because many of them were also hearing about the masks and not knowing what a mask is and who should wear it, we equipped our grandmothers who are in the tailoring program, and majority of them know how to make these fancy, they made my pocket thing here, and they make their own uniforms. So we were able to teach them how to make a mask. And a month later, the government of Uganda mandated everyone to wear a mask when our grandmothers already were ahead of the curve and had made all their masks and made masks for their children. So we're ahead of the curve because of what we had gone through before.
Fabulous. Jackson, we have one of our board members who you know, Christy Hendrickson, who's asking a little bit more about the subject of kids being back in school. It's really fascinating what you just mentioned about them being out of school. And of course, we know what that looks like here in the US, but we can only imagine what it must be like for the grandmothers to have these kids, quote, you know, at home without all of the privileges we have of this online school. So what percentage, Christy's asking, of kids are back in school now? And maybe can you talk a little bit more about what that experience was like for grandmothers trying to care for these kids under these circumstances?
Thank you, Christy, for the question. So the less than 1% of the children in the entire country have gone back to school. So that less than 1% was the students who are in their high level going to from elementary school to middle school or from high school to university. And they are actually right now sitting for their exams. Those students were allowed to go back to school on October 15th, 2020. In November and December, I was in Uganda. I was able to talk to these students, and the stories they tell you, the horrific circumstances they went through was really hard. For Nyaka students, it was even easier than their counterparts who are in public schools. The one who are in public schools in Uganda didn't get nothing, nada. The ones who attend Nyaka schools, and number one, we had a radio program, but every 2 weeks we also printed their lessons and gathered them in clusters. So the motorcycles we buy, when you see motorcycles and cars we have, we had to send our teachers under our essential workers program to take these piles of paper, drop them at a center, then where 5 children at a time would come and pick them, go revise, and every 2 weeks we did this. We're still doing this for students at Nyaka, but there are areas, even with the motorcycle and walking all day, you're not going to reach. And Steve and Janet can tell you examples of those. But we have continued to do what we can to reach these students. None of them have computers. our teachers don't have computers. I've said that if we had coronavirus had waited one more year, we were beginning to start computerizing our schools and developing online education, but that had to go on hold until we can get to a point where we could. The only technology the kids were even accessing was donated by Steve, a TV in a nursery school. With the kids not even coming to school, the higher classroom now is the only one that can go in and watch videos that we send or they can buy in town. Otherwise, there's zero technology for children.
Thank you. I think we have time for one more question, and it looks like our friend Sandy Hoover has asked one, another former liaison who you know, Jackson. Sandy, if you want to unmute and ask your question.
I did, thank you.
Great.
Jackson, you know, the grandmothers are just so inspirational. They continue to knock my socks off in terms of what they've been able to accomplish. And I was wondering if what you've done and what has been accomplished in the Nyaka area has how other people in Uganda might be familiar with it, and have there been any attempts to replicate some of what you've done there?
Thank you, Sandy. Good to see you. The Nyaka 20 years later, yes, there are several organizations who are replicating what we have done in southwestern Uganda, to the extent that even the government of Uganda under the Prime Minister have the elderly desk. They have created the elderly desk, and the Stephen Lewis Foundation out of Canada has liaised with organizations like Nyaka and 5 others who are doing small scale grandmother programs, and formed a national grandmothers consortium on a national level. I've spoken to this group several times. Our grandmother coordinator is involved in it, Joy Babiukam, and our amazing leader in Uganda, Jennifer Nantare, who manages all country programs, is the vice chair of that group because of the experience we bring to the table. As Nyaka turns 20, I also want to really refocus on what we call the Nyaka way. I don't think I've told even the board members about this plan, but here you go. You can get to know about it fast. I will be doing podcasts on a subject called the Nyaka way, basically how we have built this organization, how we have combined children who are now adults working impact, and what the role grandmothers play in every society, including our own right here. There's a cornerstone program out of Detroit that actually wants me to work with them to share how we've done this work in Nyaka, so grandmothers in Detroit can start taking in and caring for their grandchildren and build them for the future. So it is not only applicable in Uganda, apparently it's applicable in the United States and all over the world. So once the podcast comes out, we will share it with anybody who can listen, because I can't go to Nicaragua and go to Tanzania and go to Kenya, but we can share it so others can continue to replicate it.
Thank you, that's wonderful.
Thank you.
I did it. I was the one who spoke with my mute button. It always happens, and it was me. Thank you, Jackson, for that. We look forward to the podcast and the 20th anniversary of Nyaka. I want to respect that we're right at 12:45 now, and thank you all so much for signing on here and being with us for this this first briefing call that we're doing. Thank you to Jackson for being so generous with your time with us and being such a essential part of our women's empowerment community, and for the incredible work that you do. We love the organization, the grandmothers, and are really just gratified to be able to partner with you. So thank you for everything you're doing, to all of you for your generosity in making this work possible. So have a wonderful day, take good care, get vaccinated, and we'll look forward to seeing you on our next briefing call.
Yep.
Thank you. Be well.
Bye, Jackson. Bye, Paige. Thank you. Thank you, Steve and Jeanette.
Yes. Oh, thank you,
Bye-bye.
Steve and Jeanette, of course.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Steve
Bye,
and
all.
Jeanette, for introduction.